Welcome to a dialogue on accountability in the digital age. A dialogue with representatives of a global, multi-stakeholder community.
And I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged and honored to have a conversation with Mei Lin Fung. Mei Lin, welcome to the program.
Nice to be here, Frits.
Yeah. Now, Mei Lin is the co-founder with FinSurf and chair since 2020 of the People-Centered Internet. Now, she has a long and strong background in IT, including the fact that she was the two-man Skunks Works team developed the very first prototype of the customer relationship management system at Oracle. She's also an advisory board of GovStack, which we'll talk about, has worked with I4ADA, the recipient of the Women's Economic Forum Award, shortlisted for the Woman of the Year at Silicon Valley, a true global powerhouse, and is a native from Singapore. So again, Mei Lin, very much welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes. As mentioned in the beginning, you co-founded the People-Centered Internet with FinSurf. It might not be needed, but I want to ask you anyway, could you please describe who Vint is and why the People-Centered Internet was founded and what your role is?
Sure. Vint Cerf is one of the fathers of the internet. He was at UCLA on one side, one of the nodes of the first two nodes of the internet. In 2014, I organized for him the 40th anniversary of the TCP/IP spec. So he wrote the TCP/IP spec with Bob Kahn here in Palo Alto in 1974. And I had already organized the 40th anniversary of the mother of all demos for Douglas Engelbart. So earlier on, I talked about the first two nodes of the internet, Vint Cerf at UCLA, Douglas Engelbart at SRI. I organized the 40th anniversary for both of them, one in 2008 and for Doug, and then 2014 for Vint. Because of my experience with CRM and seeing how it got used in ways that I didn't expect and was quite unpleasantly surprised about, I knew that things are kind of going to go awry for the internet. But hearing the anniversary speeches, people came from all over the world for it. I understood that the internet was a gift by people to the people of the world. It was through friendship that it was created. And we had somehow lost that spirit with the great rush to profit. So I went back to Vint a year later and I said, I think we need to talk about why the internet is good for people and that we need an internet of the people, by the people, and for the people. So that's why we came together and did this. One of the fathers of the internet, godmother of CRM, came together to make sure technology is a force for good in the future.
That's quite impressive. And I just realized that, Mei Lin, that can you think of another industry with such a global impact, the internet, CRM systems, where you can still talk to its creators, where they can help steer and grow with what they developed and help steer in the right direction? I mean, Tim Berners-Lee is doing the same thing with the Web Foundation and his contract for the web. So it's amazing that we can still get you guys to come and help steer it in the right direction.
Well, it's because it's grown so fast, right, that we're still alive to do it. You know, and so I would actually say on another industry, I would like you to think back to electricity. That in fact, when Thomas Edison, Westinghouse, and Tesla were really talking about how electricity could go to the masses, they were really fearful that in fact, only people who could afford electrical generators could have electricity. And the idea of electrical utilities came about so that everybody could have access. And that effort is still going on because not everybody in the world has access to electricity. My hope is through our efforts, the founders can still influence this so that everyone can benefit. We can have participation by all in the internet, not just in the consuming of it, but in the producing and innovation that can come and be enabled by connecting each other.
Okay. Now, today, more or less 50% of the people on this planet are online. What's the maximum you think? I mean, are we going to thrive to 100 people, 100% or not?
No, I mean, even today we have people like the Amish in
True. Yeah.
in Pennsylvania who don't use electricity, right? There are reasons why people step away from the modern world, and they should be, they're certainly entitled to. But my hope is that everybody who wants to will, and I think that will be over 90%.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so end goal 90%. Can you predict by what year we're going to reach 90%?
No, I pass on that.
Okay, good. No, accepted. Now, so people-centered internet is about making certain that it was built by people for the people, and that's going to be its future. I mean, is this a concern which you're predicting, or is it a concern because you see things happening right now? We need to do something about that.
In a way, I think that where the internet is that we have unleashed tremendous power, and the kind of philosophical, historical reflection about how do we harness this power in a sustainable way has not had a chance to catch up. Think about fire. Fire, when humanity began to use it, in fact, probably burned up a lot of people and houses, right? A lot of things got burned, but eventually the guardrails were in so that we could harness fire, and down to kind of using steam for transportation and so on. So I think we need to expect that the historical trajectory of the internet will go perhaps a little more accelerated than that of fire or electricity, but it has to go through a natural evolution. I would say right now, the internet has helped us to build the idea of a house, but I think it's the house of straw. And what I want is to have the house of bricks. And the house of bricks is much more robust. I was an assembler programmer in the 70s, and I know how software came about. There are lots of bugs in software, but the wider world has really not been exposed to actually how fragile software is. There's a cartoon circulating this year about a whole big machine, and it depends on a small piston that is maintained by somebody in Nebraska, and nobody knows what they do, and they could fire that person and the whole thing could fall down. Unfortunately, for those of us in the software industry, this is the secret that we know, but there's not a lot of talking about it, because the actual response has to be the construction of far more robust software. And that's what I'm working on, which is the idea of robust, sustainable, usable digital building blocks that we can continue to evolve to be more robust, but we don't have enormous houses made of straw, which once we find the flaw, they completely fall down. No, you should be able to, okay, that brick doesn't work, replace it with another brick. I think open source software has a lot to play, a big role to play in this.
Okay, because you're already alluding maybe to an answer of a question I haven't asked yet, because when you use the metaphor of a straw house and it's going to be replaced by a brick house, so we skip the wooden house in the middle, you are actually rebuilding a completely new house. So is your argument that for the future, to have a much more sustainable internet, we have to rebuild it rather than repair it?
No, I think that for humans, the important thing is the idea of the house.
Okay.
And the idea of the house doesn't collapse. What we can do is allow ideas of the house to evolve naturally in different cultural milieus. That we have globalization, but if we try to impose the American style housing on every country in the world, that clearly won't work because of costs, inappropriateness, not having the right kitchen, not having the right size. So many things are not fitting a global version of a house. But our mental version of a house, a home where people can nurture their young and look after their elders and bring their friends in, that is something that crosses cultures. And that's the ideas that we need to hold together so that we get software that fits. So even no matter where you're building a house, you might have bricks. Well, okay, so let's have reusable bricks. Let's have reusable windows. They might be of different sizes or shapes for different cultures, but having them means that we can be much better in creating good windows, good bricks.
Good bricks. Okay, I'm going to, because you're talking about your work for GovStack at the moment. A very important chapter, but I want to finish the people-centered internet chapter right now, because I've read one of the quotes: digital technology are bringing about disruption and innovations and a profound social institutional changes. To realize the digital divide for all, we need complementary policies. I'll stop there. We need complementary policies. Can you give me an example of complementary policies, and complementary to what?
Oh, complementary to our hopes and dreams as humans, about the lives we want to lead. Right now, humans have just been considered buying instruments, right? We're being advertised to go buy. We want to, we need to think about what we want in our lives. And what we want is something that's complementary, that allows us to connect, to thrive, connect, to flourish. So that's the work that I see that it lies ahead. Have I answered it enough, or do you want to go a little bit deeper?
Maybe one spade deeper, if I may. But I'm trying to figure out how we can execute on this. Who needs to be at the table? So it's okay to point somebody needs to do this.
Oh gosh, no, you know, we're really talking about when the internet began, you couldn't point to anyone, someone needs to do this, right? Let me just go a little bit into the history of the internet, because I think that will be helpful for you to understand where I'm coming from. While DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Agency, funded the TCP/IP spec, the spread of the internet didn't happen because of defense. It happened because university professors were collaborating with each other in different universities. They started using the internet, the ARPANET, and realized, oh gosh, we can actually collaborate instantly. We can send files, we can talk to each other. And so that's it. People would say, hey, my collaborator in University of Zambia, you put in the internet and we can talk like this and get out of snail mail. And so there's this whole spread through the national research and education networks that connected the universities. Now, what we have today is that you've got things going on at national levels. So we're talking about digital cooperation. There's the United Nations Digital Cooperation Roadmap, which I'm a big advocate of. But I think that there's a missing player. It's the cities, the communities, the smaller, each, you know, even in the US, you've got rural communities, you have urban communities, you have very different characters of communities. Los Angeles versus Indiana's, you know, Idaho, these are all very different. So how can each of these do what they want to do? But I think of them like the universities of the past, the very different universities, but they had something called the Network Information Center that allowed that university to plug in to the internet. So I think communities need to begin to do that, but exchanging so that they can share and learn and use similar modules. You can use building blocks that could be adapted to work in very different places, in Jakarta, in Berlin, in Brussels, in Bogota, Colombia. So I think these are the possibilities that we have ahead of us. So I'm very positive that constructively we can get there. How long it will take is definitely dependent on the political will. What we see is that the potential for the COVID pandemic to accelerate this process is actually quite strong. Many countries are facing the need to restart their economies post-pandemic. So the people-centered internet is advocating digital finance for small, medium enterprises and for community digital public goods. And that digital finance would allow communities all around the world and small, medium enterprises to access global capital in order to both invest and to borrow, lend, so that small enterprises can get going in all of their different directions. But what the complementary policies are, we should make sure that it is trustworthy, sustainable, inclusive, that we don't fund things. In Romania, there's a ransomware startup village. Well, no, we don't want to have global finance help fund ransomware startups, even though they're probably extremely well paying. And that's the distinction that I make, is that we need to have ways to look at accountability for the SMEs and whoever's borrowing, because with digital, we in fact can do conditional issue of the funds. And if you in fact start to kind of go and take on your ransomware business division, we want to say you're no longer eligible to continue. Your credit line is cut. So we have ways in which we can use accountability to build a better world. And this is so important now. You know, with the COP26, people want to do something. I believe that digital technology can help us get there, but it requires complementary government regulatory policy, but private sector initiatives that are looking at the world in this new kind of way.
True. It's so the government should get a table, international institutes, the vendors, NGOs. Anybody else we're missing? The science community?
Oh, absolutely, the science community. So I'm very involved with EU Africa science.
Okay.
I helped to convene the United Nations Science Summit in the 75th anniversary and the 76th this year. So we believe that the United Nations should be bringing in the science community, and we've begun working on that. So, and especially my advocacy is for the participation of women in science, women in technology. So I am working with the ITU on the gender mainstreaming initiative with the ITU. We want to make sure that, as so many countries are digitizing, that women are at the table to say, hey, what about our children? Hey, what about home care? What about how do we keep going when we're the unpaid caregivers and we're not even, the work that we're doing isn't even counted or recognized? What if we digitize only the formal economy and not the informal economy? What does that do to us as humanity? I think these are very difficult questions that have to be confronted, and having women at the table will allow us to solve it incrementally rather than wait until we get into this big disaster, which is kind of happening with the birth rate going down in so many countries. If you keep treating women as expendable, they will stop having babies.
Good point. So is this own advocate when you take a more inclusive approach, make it more diverse? Am I hearing you say that that's also going to help solve the
Yes,
accountability question?
there's a brilliant new book called The Diversity Bonus,
Mhm.
which is saying that by having teams that are cognitively diverse, we end up with better solutions. And it was recommended by Satya Nadella. So I'm really pleased that he brought it to my attention. That I think that the diversity bonus is what we need in order to face the challenges of globalization and challenges that connectivity is bringing. And that's what we are saying at the People-Centered Internet. It's not an unalloyed good. It's like fire. It can burn us up. But we have to do the things that we need to do, put in the guardrails so that we can use it for the good that it can do.
That's a great objective. Fully support that. That's also why the Institute for Accountability was set up, is to raise that awareness. We need to think about accountability by design almost, because we need to realize what the impact is. Couple of questions before we have to close. What's the biggest threat for accountability today in the digital age?
The potential for misuse.
Potential for misuse.
I'm going to tell a story, and it's very personal. So I grew up in Singapore. I had no grandparents because they had all died before I was born, but two of them actually died during the Japanese War in Singapore. And when the Japanese first came into Singapore, they said, you know, who's been collaborating with the British? And some people who are enemies of my grandfather, who's a lawyer, said, oh, he was a collaborator. And yeah, you know, he was just taken off and killed. So I think we have to be very, very careful about information, the provenance of information. It is important to have accountability, but you can't allow anyone to say, oh, so-and-so did this. Yeah. You got to have a way to have laws. How did they really do this? What is the basis on which you are making accusations? There's other part of accountability, which is we need to use technology to have access controls. We have to make sure that the data isn't all or nothing. Either you can get it or you can't at all. And no, you can have granular access where you have who can access when, for what purpose, how often, to what degree, and that can change. But our rules are set as though we're still working in a paper and pencil world, when in fact, we have the entire digital dimension to use for accountability. I don't want to use accountability. It has the same problem as the internet, as fire. Accountability can be used for great good and for great harm. So that's the greatest threat to accountability, is that as we rush forward on accountability, we stop thinking enough about the ways in which it could be misused.
Even accountability can be misused. That's quite a deep thought to think about. So thank you for sharing that idea. Now, having heard all this, the story, the history of the internet, what your observations are, concerns, where would you put your effort? Where would you advise people, okay, that's where we need to focus on?
I think open source digital building blocks is really the next wave of the internet. And that's where we should focus on. We are starting at the People-Centered Internet with building blocks for digital finance for small, medium enterprises, because in the end, you know, follow the money, right? Yeah. If the money is going and can start to mandate or show that reusable building blocks, in fact, are a more effective way to get things done, to run small businesses, to run governments, then it just starts to happen. So that's how I see it. That's where we're going, is digital finance and building resilient communities. The thing is, you can't just build anything. You can't use the building blocks for doing ransomware companies. You want to do the building blocks for building resilient communities. And we actually came to this because people sent it internet. We wrote the digital recovery plan for Puerto Rico after the hurricanes. And it was during the study of looking at that where we saw silos of recovery of transportation, recovery of health, recovery of education. And we said, no, a digital recovery will allow each community to pick and choose which way they want to recover. And it needs to be robust and sustainable because the community themselves want that and they will invest in that. When outside money comes in, parachuted in, here's a hospital, then parachuted out, where, oh, how are they going to maintain the hospital? Who's going to get paid so that we can go into the hospital? These are questions that are really a big problem in the development community today. It's all very well to send money in, but who's going to maintain it afterwards? Resilient communities are a way where if we can invest in resilient communities, then the communities themselves set their own priorities. And then they take the help from outside to help them achieve what they want to maintain.
Mei Lin, thank you so much. You're a strong advocate of replacing the straw hut with a brick house, becoming resilient. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. And hopefully we'll be keeping each other up to date on our endeavors. Thank you so much.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Fritz.